Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy. My name is Tom Scarda, and I am your franchise host. I am the founder of the Franchise Academy and author of Franchise Savvy and the Magic of Choosing Uncertainty. And for 16 years now, I've been helping people find the right franchise and understand the franchise industry and whether it's a good fit for them or not. If you're thinking about buying a franchise, investing, diversifying your portfolio through franchise ownership, we should probably have a conversation. I have some good insights for you and what to stay away from and industries that you must definitely take a look at that you probably never thought about before. I also have a new online course. So if you go to thefranchiseacademy.com or tomscarda.com, same website, you will find the A to Z's on how to buy a franchise. It's an online video course. Everything that ever came out of my mouth about franchising is in those videos, everything you want to know. And it includes a 110-page book, a workbook, following the numbers on how to buy a franchise, basically. So today is interesting. I have a really cool guest with me. His name is Chris Wallace. And so Chris is the president and co-founder of InnerView Group. So it's not interview, but it's InnerView. And he considers himself an accidental entrepreneur, which I can't wait to hear more about. He started his company at age 31 after successful roles with PGA Tour and also Comcast. Chris, welcome to the Franchise Academy.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah, this is so great. So you're based in Philly, so we have that Northeast vibe going on here today. Right. I'm loving that. So give us the elevator pitch. What is InnerView?
So InnerView, it kind of goes back with the story of being an accidental entrepreneur. I've been a salesperson my whole career. Some may say my whole life. And what we do at InnerView is we really help organizations better connect what they're doing on the marketing side and what they're doing with their brand and the people who are out representing them, from salespeople to customer service. A lot of industries we work in, there might be technicians or installers or really anybody who interfaces with the company, making sure that what the strategy that the brand people spend a lot of money on, right? The positioning, the messaging, all those things, that message is coming through loud and clear in every single one of the customer touch points. That's a long way of saying we help take the brand, we translate it, and we market it to the people who work for you and who represent you, not necessarily directly their customers. It's a little bit of an indirect path, but we're making sure that the people who represent the brand believe in it and can tell that story consistently.
So interesting. So if you have a franchise and it's traditional brick and mortar, I don't know, let's just call it McDonald's since everybody knows McDonald's. So instead of just working with the folks in Illinois at the corporate office, you can actually work with franchise owners locally and really talk to their customer or their employees about their values, right? Their mission. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. So mission and values, I think, is part of it. We're to be really blunt, we're a little bit less touchy-feely with it, and we're much more about the value proposition, right? Why is it that people should want to do business with you? Not just about making them feel good about working there. That's part of it. But really, at the end of the day, what we want to help organizations do is, again, take all this money that they've spent on building their brand and deciding who they want to be in the marketplace and making sure that what they're saying aligns with the actions of their people, who serve the customers every day. And I think maybe let's take an example of a franchise business that's maybe smaller than McDonald's, okay? I look at the franchise business and say, your brand is everything. It's what you're selling. When somebody buy into your franchise, this whole idea of the brand and the process and the execution and all of the things that go into making your brand what it is and making it special in the marketplace, that's what they're paying for. That's what they're investing in. So making sure that you can really define what the experience with your brand should be, and then replicating that over time and time again, and supporting your franchisees, supporting the people who invested in you, so their people can deliver it, their employees can deliver time and time again. That's how the brand grows, right? That's how the reputation grows. And that's how you're going to be able to get a lot more people coming to you wanting to buy into your franchise, is if you really have a brand that's strong, not just to corporate, but all the way down at the point of customer contact.
Yeah, brilliant. So would you agree with this? Like for me, I believe, I'm going back to McDonald's. I believe McDonald's does not sell hamburgers, fries, and shakes. What they sell is dependability and reliability. That's their value proposition, right?
Okay. Yep.
Right. So is that what you're speaking of? Because like I know that if whether I go into a McDonald's in New York or Philly or Kansas or Florida, Seattle, doesn't matter. When I order a Big Mac, I know what I'm getting, right? 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun every time.
Yep. Yeah, I think that reliability piece is a great point. When we think about the McDonald's brand, what is their brand promise? It's you can depend on us. You know what you're going to get. You think about one that comes up a lot with me in talking about brands is Chick-fil-A. Comes up a lot. Chick-fil-A. I jokingly say Chick-fil-A did not decide to compete on chicken. Like they did not say we're going to have the best chicken. Their chicken's really good, but that's not how they're competing. They're selling an experience. You look at other players in the marketplace, you could keep going through quick serve restaurants. You've got some that are selling, fresh ingredients. You've got some that are it's something other than we're not selling tacos or burritos. We're not selling hamburgers. We're selling something else. Making sure that people understand that and understand the role they play in delivering that is so incredibly important.
Right. And so how do you get the folks that are there, working a quote unquote job to buy into the brand?
Yeah, so that's the hard part, right? So especially when you're big and you've got, if you're a franchise business that has people spread all over the place, that can be a challenge. The way we start by really building a feedback loop with those frontline teams. Okay. We're big believers that if you want somebody to do something, the first thing you need to do is ask a question, not tell them something, right? Mm-hmm. It should be asking them their opinion. And we look at it as most brands have spend a lot of money, really, and especially bigger brands spend a lot of money to find out what their customers think. What do they think of us? What do they like? What do they not like? How is our brand positioned in the marketplace? But what we've done is we've built a tool called the brand transfer study. Mm-hmm. What the brand transfer study does is we say, okay, quite literally, how well is your brand transferring from your vision of corporate down through your employees to your customers? You know what your customers think, or most brands know what their customers think, but we're providing this feedback loop to the frontline teams to say, here's what the people who serve your customers think. Here's where they think you're strong. Here's where they think you're weak. Here's where they think the competition is beating you. And really understanding what they believe and what they think is the first step in reaching them. And I think that the big why behind, if you were to, ask the question of why should an organization want to know this? We look at it and say, what the perceptions of your frontline teams, and this could be, somebody who's working a register at a McDonald's, right? If you understand what they think, you can understand what they're likely to project onto your customer. Right. If you know what their attitudes and perceptions are, you can get a sense of what they're likely to project onto your customer. You can predict what those interactions might look like. That mindset is what we're trying to illuminate for our clients and say, it's not enough just to know what the customer thinks. If you want to reach the customer, the path and the gateway to the customer is the people who serve them.
Right. So what I'm actually hearing also, and I'm sure you guys thought about this too, is if you are engaging your employees, even, hourly, non-skilled labor, in a conversation about here's our mission, here's our brand, how do you feel about it? It adds to retention for the employee. It's like, hey, they care about what I think about their stupid mission, because that's probably what an hourly employee would say. And
they might say that at Chick-fil-A. Would they say it at Chick-fil-A?
No, they wouldn't.
Right. So the notion that this is too hard to do, what's the statistic that a Chick-fil-A typical location does like 15% more business than the average McDonald's or Burger King location in one less day per week. Okay. So they're not open Sundays. So think about that. Think about whether or not those investments pay off and whether it's too hard. Look at it from the perspective of Chick-fil-A and say their business performance more than justifies the time and effort that they put into building out their brand and making sure that when somebody says it's my pleasure to serve you, that they mean it. And any customers aren't stupid. They know when the person's saying that actually means it versus they're paying lip service. Look at the commercials that they do. They're all about the employees going above and beyond and understanding the customer. And what I would put back to you, Tom, is McDonald's has been the example we've been talking about thus far. Who has a bigger impact on the perception of the McDonald's brand? The CMO or the people that work drive-thrus? Right? Think about that. You talk about unskilled hourly employees. Who has a bigger impact on how customers, consumers perceive the McDonald's brand? The people who work in their restaurants or the CMO? I'll argue it's the people who work in the restaurants all day long.
Oh, I'm with you on that. 1,000%. 1,000%. And that's why I want to have you on, because you have this kind of inside scoop, I guess, insightful, and love that. And I wanted to just say that you had brought up that stat about 15% over McDonald's. Another way I say it is a Chick-fil-A, one unit will do more than a McDonald's, a Chipotle, and a Subway combined. I mean,
and that's just one example. You could go into other industries too, but obviously your audience is in the franchise space. And I think there's examples throughout the franchise space. I'm an investor in a franchise business. I don't own a franchise, but I've invested in a franchise business and I've seen what it takes to build that brand. And, the consistency, right? Franchising is all about a playbook, right? You have to have a playbook that can be repeated over and over and over again. Understanding how to connect that playbook and make that playbook a great reflection of the brand that you want to be, and have it be something that a franchisee can pick up and then replicate with their people. It's so important. And it's one thing to say, well, here's the POS system that we use. And here's where you order your cleaning supplies from. And here's where you get your blenders from, so on and so forth. It's another thing to have the experience. And this is, ultimately where all of this is going, is the customer experience has to stand out, right? That's why you say consistency is what McDonald's selling, as opposed to hamburgers. The experience is what's going to make people decide to do business with you or not decide to do business with you. I don't care what kind of franchise business you're in, you're delivering a customer experience in some way, shape, or form. Defining what experience you want to deliver and being able to replicate it, I would think it's got to be in your top 3 priorities for your business.
It really should be, if it's not. So when you conduct the brand transfer study, is that paperwork? Is that interviewing? Like, what does that look like?
It looks a lot like market research. So it's a market research tool that we've sort of adapted for the internal audiences, but it's an electronic link. It's delivered via any internet enabled device. It works great on mobile. The tool that we use works great on mobile. And they take between 7.5 and 8 minutes to complete. So a lot of people say, because businesses that we work in are larger brands and they have a lot of frontline employees, hourly employees that don't necessarily have the time. They have to clock out and things like that. So finding time in the margins isn't easy. So that you can't exactly send them a 40-minute assessment. But we've worked with a firm that comes from the market research industry. And we've, like I said, adapted it and gotten it to the point where we can gather a tremendous amount of information and really crunch a lot of numbers with 7.5 minutes worth of responses from your team. So,
wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So if, I'm thinking about like CEOs of franchises that are listening in now to this interview. So this is really, it's 2 levels for them, because it's the franchise owners and then it's the staff as well. And it's those staff members that are having the larger impact on, the reviews on Yelp, and things like that.
Yep.
So it's really a really cool niche that you have identified. Outside of franchising, though, I know you work with a lot of companies. What are other examples that people might recognize to say, oh, these guys really are dialed in all the way down to the employees on the front line?
So a couple examples of companies that we've worked with. We've done work with Blue Nile Jewelry, which is a good size online jewelry brand. They've been around since the dot-com boom of the turn of the 21st century. We did work with them, and really, what it came down to with them is aligning their brand with their customer experience, right? Looking at the way they were doing their marketing, look at their strategy, compare it to what they're doing from a customer experience perspective, and determine what some of those gaps were. And sometimes I like the Blue Nile example just because sometimes the answers are pretty obvious, right? Things reveal themselves really quickly. And, it really is the difference between, I'm going to use a phrase from a CMO that I'm friends with, who said the phrase, we're going to do a great job of getting the words right. But the problem is we can talk the talk, but are we going to walk the talk? Right. And, you think of brands that spend so much, invest so much in marketing. And then when it comes time to walk the talk and make sure that the experience backs up the brand promise, a lot of them fall down. So Blue Nile would be an example of a brand we work with. We work with a lot of brands, but from a consumer perspective, that's one that has an excellent reputation for their customer service. And they actually, believe it or not, their reputation for customer service was actually in some ways hurting them from a performance standpoint. They were so focused on serving the customer that they forgot what serving the customer serving the customer meant. They got away from that a little bit. So that would be one example I would use.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, so going back into my history a little bit, I used to work for the New York City subway system. And so there's always an issue with motivating employees in that kind of situation, because they're always like, can you, do I get overtime out of this? Do I get more money if I do this? You know what I mean? And so years ago, I'm going back into the early to mid 90s, I worked with a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Diekman in New York. He was hired to help conductors make better announcements. And I worked with him for 4 years. So he hired me to help to teach classes on making announcements on the trains and in the stations. And in those classes, we never once talked about how to make an announcement. But we talked about how to be a better person internally and a better person for your family. And that's what really pushed the envelope to the point where the announcements were getting letters about great announcements, which was the opposite, for 100 years. And so is that the kind of thing that you're talking about, is to try to get kind of under the skin of the employee, if you will, like really getting them to understand that it's a lot more than just saying, hello and thank you and that kind of thing?
Yes. I couldn't have said it better myself, Tom. The way it's an influence-based strategy. And I want to unpack that for a minute. I know that sounds like consultant speak. What I mean by that is it's the difference between saying, New York, New Yorkers, I'm from upstate New York originally, by the way, not the city, but I'm from upstate. And New Yorkers have a reputation for being direct. Well, sometimes the way you get somebody to do something is help them identify the answer for themselves. Let the answer reveal itself, and the actions and behaviors are going to follow once it's their idea, versus, this is what you need to do, top down, say this, do this. That doesn't work. I can tell you flat out that trying to drive cultures of compliance in 2021 heading into 2022, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Everything is an influence-based strategy. There's companies making a lot more money than mine is, who are driving, internal influence-based, leadership inside organizations, because it's all about building coalitions. It's all about, building respect and building, empathetic leadership that's drawing people into the process. And it's not about telling people what to do. There's a lot of organizations that have good plans, but where they fall down is the execution. And a lot of times the execution is failure to get people on board. So it goes back to what you said, is help them see the path on their own and help it, let it reveal itself, versus telling them what to do.
So Chris, it sounds also like true leadership, right? Because I always feel that there's a big difference between a leader of an organization and the manager. The manager needs to realize that you don't manage people, you lead people, you manage paperwork. You know what I mean?
Right.
So do you do a lot really at the C-suite as well, trying to get those folks to change if that's noted, maybe that's part of the process, right?
We get asked that question a lot, Tom, to be totally honest. And I think that the best way I can answer it is this. We sort of do it the same way that I just described. We do it the same way with leadership, which is our point to an executive, mostly on the marketing side, is pretty simple. It is, as soon as you start listening to your people who are in the trenches, you're winning. As soon as you make the decision to gather feedback from them, what you're able to do with that and what those insights can do for you from a strategy perspective, from a leadership perspective, are they're hard to quantify, right? There's so many different ways you can go with it. And I'll give you an example. What we find is most organizations hire us and they say, we need to get our people on message. Okay, we need to drive a message down. And we gather the input from the frontline teams. And the same thing always ends up happening. They always look at the data and they say, well, maybe we have it wrong. Maybe it's not them who has it wrong. Maybe we should be shaping our strategy based partially on what our frontline teams are seeing every single day, rather than just the research that we have, or rather than our hunches, right? Or rather than just industry data. Maybe listening to our people is a great way to shape our strategy. So from that perspective, I would say that we are helping them. We don't go in and tell them we're going to knock their heads together and make them better leaders, but by sharing with them a new perspective, the perspective they don't have from their frontline teams, it really opens their eyes. And I think it reveals ways for them to be leaders in better ways. So I wouldn't say the core of what we're doing is leadership development, but there definitely is an element of, we talk about a lot about alignment, right? Getting leaders aligned around an approach. And it's a lot easier to get aligned around an approach when you're working off of data than hunches.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you got a whole bunch of people who have their own hunches and they're competing for, no, my hunch is the right one. When you can look at some data and people can, look at those insights and say, yes, that path is a little bit more obvious now. That makes sense. Now you've got a leadership team that's aligned. When they're aligned, the results downstream with the frontline teams are a lot better.
I totally agree. And just a personal example, and this is not about me, but I think this will resonate. So the founder of the company I work with called Franchise, Jeff Elgin, just a brilliant guy, one of the smartest people I ever met. So when he has like decisions to make, big strategy decisions on the momentum of the company and which direction and all that kind of stuff, he'll pull together people that are on the front lines doing the consulting like me every single day. And that's how he makes his decisions. I mean,
right.
It's brilliant, right? That's the kind of stuff you're talking about. And just recently, I got to say, maybe 3 years ago, he decided we do a conference twice a year. And he said, hey, instead of like the home office planning the conference, could I have some volunteers that are consultants every day? You plan the conference. Tell us what you want. And the dynamic of everything changed. It was always a good conference. And it went from good to great, to not to quote books here, but that is really, I just thought it was a brilliant thing. And it sounds like, he's on the wavelength that you're teaching companies all over the country.
I think that's true. And I think that it's just counterintuitive to a lot of companies, especially bigger companies. They really do think that the traditional thought is that top-down leadership style is how you're going to get results. And I just think that people find there's this sense that you give up control if you go about it that way. If you listen to the frontline teams, if you make them, part of the process, that you're going to give up control. But anybody who's been in sales knows that the best way to gain control in a conversation is to give it up a little bit and to ask questions and to really understand your audience more. And that's what we're trying to do with organizations, is help them understand this audience better so they can make better business decisions. They want to reach their customers, understand what's happening in the trenches.
Yeah, it's great. And you said a phrase before that I think is the kind of opposite of what you want to hear when you talk to a CEO. You said like, they bring us in and say, we have to drive our message, to the staff. And just that phrase, drive the message. It's like, that's not how you get things done, right? So it's about, nurturing the message and let it kind of trickle down and not drive it.
So I'm gonna put a different word on it. Okay, take the word drive out. Sell the message, right? And I know that sales, sales. Some people think of it as a form of a 4-letter word, but the reality is, and we look at it as the people who serve your customers on the front lines. If you look at them as an audience to be won over, as opposed to an audience to be driven, to drive down that message. If you sell them on the ideas and really help them see, what's compelling about it, right? Try to convince them. Don't assume that they just have to do it and they have to comply. If they're convinced, think about the difference between what they're going to deliver for your customers, the level of passion and enthusiasm they're going to deliver for your customers. If they're convinced that your story is a good one, there's a big difference. Set that bar a little bit higher and try to convince your frontline teams. You're going to have much better results and you're going to have much greater consistency. And again, in the franchise space, consistencies, I just can't think of anything that's more important in the franchise space than consistency.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. Consistency all day long. So you worked for Comcast, and before that, I think it was the PGA. What did you do for them?
Sales and marketing in both instances. So with the PGA Tour, I worked for their Tournament Players Club network, doing sales and marketing, and then similar skills brought over to Comcast in their entertainment division. I did sales and marketing with the Golf Channel and a variety of the other properties that are now part of the NBC Universal family. So I was there through that transition and got to work with some great entertainment brands over the years.
Yeah. So how did the accident happen?
That's the accident. That's the accident was when I worked for Comcast and they went through the acquisition of NBC Universal. That meant that a lot of jobs were being relocated and things like that. And I didn't want to relocate. And the opportunity sort of presented itself to really start my own thing and to start doing this work of helping the product and strategy and marketing people connect with their frontline teams and get that message downstream the right way and build that feedback loop. And it really happened by accident. I didn't fall out of bed one day and say, I'm going to be a entrepreneur come hell or high water. It was really something that sort of evolved, naturally. And I'm not going back. I love running a small business. I love my team and we love working with clients. So I'm not going back.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'd love to hear that. Are there any books that you've read that have changed significantly your trajectory in business? So
I'm going to answer this in an unconventional way. Okay. I'm one of those guys that I love reading business books. I'll devour business books. And you get to a point where some of the business books start to sound the same. I shouldn't say sound the same. You read business books and there's so much logical thought in there. And I feel like I found myself over a period of time reading business books and saying, I don't know why companies don't do more of the stuff that's in these books. Like in theory, all this stuff is great, but in practice, we're not seeing these things done very often. So my answer to your question is going to be, I always read business books. You mentioned Good to Great. I read Good to Great on my honeymoon. Okay. Which is not a joke. I read Good to Great on my honeymoon. But over the last couple of years, I had a friend really open my eyes. I would never read fiction. I would never read fiction. And a friend of mine recommended a book during the pandemic, a series of books. And I really got into them. And I found that stepping out of the business and the X's and O's of running a business and thinking about things through the lens of human relationships and the way that drama plays out in a novel and things like that, I found that was, I don't know, giving me better perspective somehow. So I don't know if it's one single book that I would say, but kind of switching my strategy from looking for business answers in business books and more thinking about stories and relationships and the way that people, what makes people tick through the lens of a fiction and through a fiction book and a novel really helped me gain some perspective on how I was as a leader. It really interesting the way that things shake out, but that would be my answer is I started reading a series of books last year that I feel like gave me more perspective on being a leader than business books did.
Wow. I have to ask, what book was it or what series?
So there's the author's name is Frederick Bachman, and he's had several bestsellers. But the books that I read, it's the Beartown series. The first book is called Beartown. It's about hockey in the depths of the forest of Sweden, and but it's basically Friday Night Lights for hockey, but just incredible character exploration. And truly, like, there one character in particular, I found myself thinking about how I led by the example of this teenage kid in the book. And again, feeling like being drawn into that story helped me attach to things I need to be better at. So I never would have thought that would have happened because I was never a fiction reader. But through the pandemic, I found that to really help me, in my day-to-day work, and, really gleaning stuff from the fiction that I'm reading.
Yeah, maybe it's almost like for some people holding up a mirror to yourself about how you act and seeing a different reflection. So that is great.
Any good novel is going to be relatable, right? Any good novel is going to be relatable. And I think that you start to see things, you start to associate things with your own life, with your own, your own circumstance. And it forces you to be a little bit introspective. Dare I say, it forces you to take a bit of an inner view. Dare I say.
There you go. I like that a lot. Take that inner view. Are there any technical apps that you like to use on a regular basis for business? Anything that you would want to share with folks?
Apps that we use on a regular basis. Trying to think of like the productivity tools. We are big fans of Expensify. So people that are in, that have expenses and things like that. We've been using Expensify for years. We use a great project management tool called Rike, and I think it's WRIKE. Our team is we jokingly call it Riked up. Everybody's got their marching orders through Rike. So it's a way we keep track of things. And then really over the pandemic, we've really, we've become power users of the Microsoft 365 suite. So Teams and the Teams chat functions, SharePoint, all of that are really mainstays of our company. So good old Microsoft. So they're everywhere, but their products are pretty good. So
yeah, and they're intuitive and they get work done for you. So.
I have one more that I'll recommend. This is off the radar. We use a tool called BombBomb, BOMB. And I appeared on one of I believe he's one of the founders. His name's Ethan Butte. I appeared on his podcast. And what BombBomb is it's a video encoding tool that basically it's a little plugin for your web browser. And instead of sending somebody an email that says, following up with you on that note that I sent last week, you can send a quick video snippet. So think of it like voicemail, like a video voicemail meets email. And you can email this quick little clip. It stores it, encodes it, gives you a clip that you can copy and paste in very quickly. It's really cool. We have found it a great way to stay connected, especially with clients, definitely with prospects too, but really with our clients. We're sending them notes. We're thanking them when they do something great. We're thanking our people when they do something great. It's an excellent personalized communication tool. So we swear by BombBomb on our team.
Yeah. BombBomb is great. I know them. There's Loom, which does the same thing, and Vidyard, which I've been using for a long time now. So yeah, that's great stuff. And that's the next wave. I think that's where we're going next. Everything will just be video and not voice.
For sure.
So that's cool. And what is one myth that you would like to break about what you guys do and helping companies grow through their employees?
We jokingly call a lot of the work we do, we refer to as myth busting. We're doing our brand transfer study does a lot of myth busting. I would say the biggest myth is that what we do is the same thing as employee engagement. There's an element of employee engagement in what we do, but the difference between a brand transfer study and employee engagement survey, think of it as employee engagement surveys are about your satisfaction in the workplace. What we do is about your perceptions of the brand you represent, and they're very different. What we do is very much targeted toward customer interactions. We are all about improving the quality and the results of customer interactions. They're precious, right? Nobody gets enough of them. Nobody has more customer interactions than they want. So making sure those customer interactions are delivered with confidence, with passion, with enthusiasm and pride, that's very different in our mind than employee engagement, which is around compensation and benefits and snacks in the break room or what's in the vending machine or whatever the case may be. What we do really it's tangentially related to that, but they're not the same thing.
Right. Well said. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or your team, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to find me is through LinkedIn. Now, Chris Wallace is not an uncommon name, so I'd encourage people look for InnerView and look for Philadelphia, because that's where we're located, is in Philadelphia. Website is innerviewgroup.com. And like you said, Tom, it's INNER view as opposed to interview. And then finally, brandtransferstudy.com. That's really the hub for what we're doing with that tool. It's a proprietary process that we have. We've got a great explainer video that really talks about how we do it. So I would encourage people to check out brandtransferstudy.com.
Brandtransferstudy.com. And we'll put it in the notes. So if you go to the franchiseacademy.com and look for this podcast, all the information will be there, all the contact information for Chris and his team in Philly. So Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been insightful. This is unbelievable stuff.
Tom, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.